bill, planning to pass it without Republican support. American service people will be under orders to roll up their uniform sleeves to get the coronavirus vaccination starting as early as next month.
This isn't just about you. It's about your ship. It's about your platoon. It's about your squadron. It's your opportunity to contribute to the health and readiness of your teammates and thereby the nation.
Pentagon spokesman John Kirby says the timetable could be accelerated if the FDA gives final approval to what are now considered to be investigational coronavirus vaccines. Some Texas hospitals overloaded by a surge in cases of the Delta variant of the virus.
Hospitals in Austin, Texas say they are filling up their intensive care units with patients experiencing severe COVID-19 symptoms. The area has 200 standing ICU beds. Through the weekend, 184 of them were occupied. The filling hospitals is prompting worry among city officials who scoffed at Texas Governor Greg Abbott preventing them from requiring city employees vaccinate. Austin will now consider paying bonuses to city workers who choose to vaccinate.
Fox's Evan Brown. America is listening to Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Starting August 1st, pandemic unemployment assistance claimants must start searching for work to remain eligible for PUA benefits. 3 work searches a week are required. Work searches include registering on HireGuam.com, meeting with employers, submitting resumes and applications, and attending job fairs. Only a few are exempt from the work search requirement. This includes those working reduced hours, those in training programs, and self-employed individuals. Remember, PUA ends September the 4th. Now is the time. Let's rebuild our workforce. For more information, go to dol.guam.gov.
Chicago's police superintendent David Brown says anti-police rhetoric is taking its toll on police officers.
They feel alone. They feel unsupported. They feel like no one appreciates the work they do. They're human, so they have a lot of expressions of discouragement.
A shooting Saturday during a traffic stop left a Chicago police officer dead, another critically wounded. 2 brothers have now been charged in that case. In Cleveland, a 15-year-old boy has pled guilty to charges in the shooting death of an undercover police officer last year and has agreed to testify against a 17-year-old who's believed to be the actual gunman who killed Detective James Skirnovitz and an informant. A California real estate heir accused of murder 2 decades ago has taken the stand in his own defense. A United Nations climate agency has issued what it calls a code red for humanity, claiming that within a decade we will likely exceed a 3.6-degree rise in global temperatures unless greenhouse gas emissions are reduced by then. Brown University has systematically and repeatedly failed to protect women from rape and other sexual misconduct, according to a federal class action lawsuit filed recently by 4 current and former female students. The suit filed in Providence federal court alleges the Ivy League school in Rhode Island actively prevented the reporting of incidents of sexual violence and perpetuated a culture of silence on the campus. One of the women says she was advised against making a formal complaint after being sexually assaulted at a party hosted by some rugby team members because it happened at an off-campus site where officials said it would be more difficult to hold the perpetrator responsible. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Need to finish the job or start one the right way? Get the right stuff at East West Rental Center. You can switch to easy mode using industrial strength equipment. With years of experience helping builders, East West Rental gives you exactly what you need. Tools for landscaping, concrete, lifts, trucks, tables, tents, chairs, water blasters, excavators, forklifts, air compressors, and more. Call East West Rental Center at 646-1463 or visit them in Upper Dumont. Open Monday to Saturday from 7 to 5, Sundays 8 to 5.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's what I've been saying for a long time, and I'm going to keep on saying it. So here we are again on Tall Tales. We still got 4 whole days of Tall Tales left, so I'm pretty happy today. Friday's the day that gets me down because we got 2 whole days without Tall Tales. It's tough. Okay, let's take a look at Zemi Ikotny. The Daily News. You know, sometimes I think when the editorial writers at the papers are going to do the editorials, they sit down to bacon and eggs or a big thick steak, and you can kind of tell it from reading the editorials. Today it looks like they chowed down on oatmeal. The Daily News. On Monday, Adelup released a list of organizations and programs that will be receiving $36.9 million in education stabilization funds under the governor's Education Assistance and Youth Empowerment Grant Program. The program funded through the CARES Act was designed to fund engagement opportunities for public, private, and charter school students. Schools were closed the last weeks of 2019-2020 school year, and the 2021 school year was a combination of online and limited face-to-face learning. Young learners lost in-person construction, school sports, physical education, and many of the social interactions and opportunities associated with school, not to mention the fun. You know, for an awful lot of you tailgaters out there, you're looking back and say, you know, high school was one of the best times of my life. I had so much fun. And not when you're staying home watching old episodes of Law and Order, trying to prepare for the next episode of Tall Tales. They also had to give up some activities that are just part of being a kid. How many birthday parties, fiestas, festivals were canceled? How many trips to the museum and movie outings were postponed? Back in May, the Guam State Clearinghouse asked the community to help create ways to keep young people engaged. The agency, which is under the Lieutenant Governor's office, sought proposals for educational institutions, government entities, community organizations, and nonprofits to develop programs and activities addressing the learning loss for students along with improving their social and emotional well-being. That's a tall order, but the people of Guam stepped up to the challenge. Some 77 programs received grants, and on and on and on. We get to the end of the editorial. We commend the organizations and individuals who developed these plans. After losing so much, our island's youth have a lot to look forward to. Yeah, very good. You filled the news hole, Daily News. I guess you could call it an editorial, loose terminology. And then we have the Post. We can avert the comeback of pandemic restrictions by recalling the governor. Jose's answering the phone, so he's a little slow with the horn right now. Yeah, the title, we can avert the comeback of pandemic restrictions. The stakes are higher for Guam and all of us who live here. We could be on the brink of relying on primarily on our internal resources should the Wuhan virus cases surge further for longer, because a lot of federal assistance programs are ending. This means each of us must take our responsibility seriously to keep the Wuhan virus from spreading. Many of the pandemic restrictions have been lifted, but we still need to do our part because Wuhan virus is not completely gone. In fact, after Guam went through months of risk score below 1, we saw in recent weeks that our area's risk score increased multiple times to more than 5. Double the 2.5 acceptable threshold our government has established. We also have learned several people are hospitalized for Wuhan virus infection, and that's a concern. A run-on sentence there, guys. It's important to keep the government restrictions from being imposed on us, and we can do that by not being complacent with the safeguards. We should still wear masks when around other people outside of our homes, even when we've been fully vaccinated. We should continue to keep hand sanitizing yeah, we know all this stuff. Jeez. Whoa. The governor last week announced she's requiring holdouts among the more than 7,000 strong executive branch employees to get vaccinated against Wuhan virus. Certain businesses such as United Airlines, Bank of Hawaii, First Hawaiian Bank have also required Wuhan virus vaccination among their employees. The governor said the Delta variant and its mutations remain a serious and imminent threat to the island, and the Wuhan virus vaccine has proven to be our greatest defense. And then the quote that I picked up from yesterday's news, I'm not going to go through, we've been through this so many times before, but here's the meaningful quote. Should our situation escalate, I will not hesitate to reinstate restrictions to continue protecting our island. I will not hesitate. I'm kind of looking forward to it, to tell you the truth. Yeah.
It sounds like a dare.
Yeah. Well, as I said yesterday, she could have said, I know, as much as we dread going back into restrictions, sometimes we have to do that which is unpleasant because it's part of what we need to do to get a good result. She could have said something like that, but not our governor. Should our situation escalate, I will not hesitate to reinstate restrictions. I wonder if she was, I will not hesitate, pounding the table. All right, no blue stars today, that's for sure.
You know, again, I'm lost for words because this thing is confusing me, and I'm not trying to be, I think the word is facetious and acting like I'm confused about this stuff.
Well, that's my job, Jose.
That's
being
true.
Facetious.
But this is really confusing that they're telling us, or they're quoting the governor as saying the Delta variant and its mutations remain a real and imminent threat. What is that threat? They haven't defined it because we don't have this influx of hospitalizations like we did in the very beginning of this pandemic. Is a threat infections? Because anybody can be infected with a common cold, the flu, and be done with it. And from what I'm hearing, the infections aren't being protected from the, you're not being protected from the infections through the vaccine. You're being protected by severe illness by the vaccine.
Yeah, it tends to ameliorate the seriousness of the illness.
And that's a whole different narrative.
Yeah.
Than get vaccinated, save someone else's life.
Yeah, well, here's the real narrative, Jose. I will not hesitate to reinstate restrictions.
Yeah,
That's the real
exactly.
narrative. Yeah.
And I'm going to extend my EO another month.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, this is what I've got on the card. I start out with the left versus the United States Marine Corps. And obviously, I'm not going to say that I'm unbiased on this subject. It is serious. It's serious for those of us who still test positive for the USMC virus. But it's a serious thing for the whole country, and I'll explain why as I get into that. I've got the governor versus the legislature. Well, you know, that's always going on all the time. But this time it's different because the legislature is I'll have to side with the governor here. The legislature is trying to usurp some of the governor's power in this battle. And I'm going to get back into Jim Moylan's treadmill, too, today when I talk about that. It's not going to be a nice day for Jim Moylan. Next on the card is Byrne versus Moylan. And then we've got Neil Weir versus Samoans. Biden versus the Constitution. Oklahoma versus the First Amendment. And then we get to some of the older stuff that I haven't done yet. The Pope versus Bishop Bessieux. Tall Tales versus Rapinoe, etc. So let me jump right into the left versus the United States Marine Corps. And this is an article that ran in Town Hall. It was written by a guy named Will Alexander. Woke politics destroyed the Marine Corps I knew. And as I read it, I could say the same thing. When I signed up for the Marines in '78, the guy says, well, I signed up a little bit before that. I was 21 years ahead of the guy. I was in and out before he even thought about it, probably before he was even born, right?
I was about to say.
Yeah. When I signed up for the Marines in '78, I had no clue what I was getting into. I just wanted to get out of my hometown. I can really identify with that. After a few minutes at boot camp, wanted to go back. I think everybody who does it has the same feeling. You know, at the end of that first day, you're saying, God, what did I get myself into here? There was only one way out now, 13 weeks through a humid, swampy, mosquito-infested chunk of hell at Parris Island, South Carolina, a godforsaken place where tidal salt marshes breed habitats of pestiferous biting flies, blood-sucking sand fleas. Well, I missed that part of it because I went to MCRD San Diego, which the guys who went through Parris Island brand as Hollywood Marines. Around 1 a.m., the bus carrying about 60 of us parked beside a platoon of yellow footprints at the recruit depot. We had barely stopped before a drill instructor stormed the bus. Outside a squad of DIs prowled the footprints like a pack of pit bulls. We were hungry, sleep-deprived, and now terrified. Fear is the recruit's first welcome to the Corps. Not because of some dumb DI's power trip. Fear is serious business. It's an ever-present reality in the superhuman dangers of war that must be cloned in a control environment so recruits learn how to deal with it. War requires you to act quickly, think clearly, and perform high-level physical feats despite the presence of extreme fear, extreme confusion, extreme chaos, and the specter of death. So DIs would overload us with mental, emotional, and physical challenges to dig in what we were really made of. They had to. We were looking to be the best at Earth's most brutal profession. Step one was to survive the time-worn crucible that forged some of history's most lethal fighters. Beneath the DI's bark was a serious mission to find recruits with raw steel that could be shaped into the kind of metal that endures the maddening ferocities of war. All others were weeded out. All others were weeded out. I remember when I went through, a lot of people were weeded out. For now, we were all, quote, maggots, vectors of ingrained habits that destroyed the kind of lethality and unit cohesion needed to win wars. DIs had a name for these habits: civilian trash. It didn't matter where you came from, how rich or poor you were, country boy or city. Once you stepped off that bus, the trash had to go. We were all the same now, maggots, and we're all one color, green. You have now entered, quote, you have now entered the Marine Corps Recruit Depot, Paris Island, South Carolina. The drill instructor belted out. From now on, the last word of out of your mouth will be, sir. Is that understood? We blurted something, smatterings of haphazard yes, sirs. And then the drill instructor said, I said, is that understood? Yes, sir. Now in ear-shattering unison. Get off my bus. The cue unleashed the pit bulls. They barked us onto the footprints. They barked us in and out of the barbershop, and they barked us into receiving where we dumped our civilian gear for military gear. This is about the time when a human stench assaulted your nostrils. DIs had a name for that, too. The smell of fear. A collective body odor secreted by Marine crews fresh from the cushy culture of civilian life. From day one at boot camp to my retirement 20 years later, the clockwork of the Marine Corps' fine-tuned machinery orbited around two simple things: preparing for war, called readiness, and winning wars. That's it. That was the gyroscope that anchored us to the sacred purpose of our national existence. That's the way it was. Not anymore. Today, the highest performance in the brute physical demands of uncivilized combat falls second to the politics of gender equality, LGBT rights, and now hunting down the imaginary white supremacists in the name of race equity. Civilian trash. It's a shame. It institutes division. Woke politicians know it. They don't care, but they've done it anyway. Sound familiar? More than anyone, the Obama administration implemented most consequential changes in the U.S. military history. Changes that deviates more towards rights and careerism than combat effectiveness. These are fake problems. We already had that stuff. I witnessed it for 20 years. But in 2013, Obama's Defense Secretary, Leon Panetta, lifted the ban on women serving in combat units. Marine Commandant General Joe Dunford implemented Panetta's directive by integrating 2 infantry companies through a series of training exercises, matched them against the existing all-male infantry units. The results were predictable. In 134 combat tasks, all-male units outperformed gender-integrated units in 69% of the tasks. Acceptable in peace, deadly by combat standards. In 2015, Dunford requested that the course be exempted from the new policy. Navy Secretary Ray Mabus declined. Well, we remember Ray Mabus. He's the guy that came out to scold the crew of the Teddy Roosevelt. Remember? Yeah, because they wouldn't back Mabus's decision to fire Captain Crozier. So Mabus spent 24 hours on a single passenger jet flying out here, got on the horn, the squawk box on the aircraft carrier, scolded the crew. It's just something you don't do.
He's a civilian, right?
He's a civilian.
Wow.
Yeah, and he was an ex-Secretary of the Navy 3 days later. Unfortunately, a little bit too late. That was the same year the Army announced that 2 females had graduated from Army Ranger School. Now, if you don't know much about Army Ranger School, it's tough. And, you know, the real hardcore soldiers will talk, you know, will wear that Ranger badge on their chest with great pride. And to not have a Ranger badge, air assault, airborne, etc., means that you're, I suppose you can't say this anymore, you're bare-chested.
You trigger somebody.
Yeah, somebody would be triggered for sure, right? Yeah, so Army Ranger School is really tough. It's a month long, and officers who are sent to Ranger School who don't make it through, it may very well be a career-ending event.
I went to Ranger School, but as a Boy Scout up in Dahlonega, Georgia. It was a cool campsite.
Yeah, well, it's probably the Army Ranger School is probably heading that direction too now.
I hope not.
Now that it's co-ed, right? Journalist Susan Katz Keating, who covered the story for People magazine, discovered that Washington politicians put intense pressure on evaluations to graduate the women. Their performance by combat standards was disastrous, but Obama's appointees didn't care. They needed the Ranger fiction as proof that women are ready for combat roles. Defense Secretary Ashton Carter opened combat units to females 4 months later. Before there was defund the police, there was defang the military. It's gone far beyond women in infantry units. As former Army Captain James Hassan pointed out in his book, Stand Down, the mission to transform the culture of the military has produced safe space stickers on the doors at the Naval Academy, officers apologizing for microaggressions against Air Force cadets, the Army being urged to end hypermasculinity, PowerPoints on male pregnancy, and monitoring of social media accounts for evidence of white supremacy. This is really, really serious.
Wow.
Yeah. Male and female recruits will soon be required to train together at Parris Island and Marine Corps recruit people. It's already happened. It's already happened. Robert H. Barrow, Jr., Marine Commandant during my first tour, gave a sobering warning to a Senate hearing in 1991 against emphasizing equal rights and careerism over combat effectiveness. Barrow commanded troops in large-scale conventional wars like World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, unlike the low-intensity conflicts against backward nations that we've grown used to. Quote, exposure to combat is not combat, Barrow said. Combat is finding, closing with, and killing or capturing the enemy. It's killing. That's what it is, and it's done in an environment that is as difficult as you can possibly imagine. Extremes of climate, brutality, death, dying. It's uncivilized. Now, here's the point of this whole article. Women can't do it. Yeah. No.
Our phone lines aren't lit up.
Yeah. Women can't do it. So, you know, and I know what it's like. I know what it was like anyhow. I suppose there might be one woman in 5,000 that could do it. I don't think I've ever met that woman. I don't know that I'd ever want to. But it is and this is not war. This is just boot camp, But it's what turns ordinary civilians into Marines. It's absolutely essential, and they're even screwing that up. So, and I will tell you from my own personal experience, my 82 years, etc. Training women and men together in boot camp is a big mistake. There were women in the Marine Corps. Well, there were actually. Back until 1972, we had what were called women Marines, but they weren't actually part of the regular Marine Corps force. They were sort of like an auxiliary, and they were Remington Raiders and that kind of stuff. 1972, they were actually brought into the services, which maybe isn't a bad idea, but this guy says you don't send women into combat.
It's curious. It almost feels like it did away with its true purpose just to be another, I don't know, I wouldn't even say social experiment. It's another society.
Yeah, it's not an experiment. It's the classic case of identity politics. And the gospel in identity politics is these things like sex and race are social conventions. There's no physical reality to them. So women and men, outside of just a minor difference in external plumbing, are what society conditions them to be. So if society wouldn't allow them combat roles in the armed forces, then their promotion potential was not good, because in order to be promoted, you have to, if there's a war, you got to be in it. So we put aside, the true mission of the armed forces so that we could practice identity politics is what we've done.
That's what it seems.
Yeah, and I suspect that no war has ever been won by identity politics. I suspect that up until now, no war's ever been lost by identity politics, because no country's ever been that stupid before. All right, let's take a short break, and I'll come back here and wrap up the Marine Corps.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Hafare, this is Congressman St. Nicholas. Your congressional office would like to remind you that pandemic unemployment assistance is set to expire on September 6th of this year. We encourage the people of Guam to seek out active employment as much as possible, as jobs continue to remain limited, and we want to prevent hardship for our people at the conclusion of the PUA program. Thank you, and situas mahase.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Yeah, so here we are. Semper Fi, Semper Fidelis, always faithful, up until now, right? Hey, Colin Clark. Recruits pissed their pants because they didn't refer to themselves in the third person, often asking to use the head. Now, the head is the toilet. That goes back to nautical tradition, because back sailing ships, there was a long prominence at the head of the ship that sails were anchored to, and there was something like a chair out there, and it was the head of the ship. So if a Marine, if a boots are not Marines, if a boot wants to go to the toilet, he must say, "Sir, Private Klitzkie requests permission to make a head call." Sir. You don't refer to yourself as anything other than in the third person, because you don't have much of an identity. It's certainly mind control, conditioning, etc.
And there's a purpose for that.
But there's a very good purpose for it because, you know, you may have thought you were really something really spectacular before you came in, but when you're in the Marine Corps in boot camp, you ain't.
They could go join G.I. Joe if they want to do that.
Exactly.
And that's fictional.
I expect our Carl's listening, so I'll give him a break today, okay? Yeah. Okay. So wrapping this up again, going back to the end of the article. It's killing, and it's done in an environment that is as difficult as you can possibly imagine. Extremes of climate, brutality, death, dying. It's uncivilized. Women can't do it. If America continues down this road, he said, it would destroy the Marine Corps, something no enemy has been able to do in over 200 years. And I would suspect that the Chinese are laughing as hard as they possibly could about our woke armed forces, our woke Marine Corps, which is going to hell in a handbasket. So why is this serious? You know, well, I've done my time. I'm not going into the service, and I wouldn't let my son go into the Marine Corps anyhow, and on and on and on. The reason it's serious is this, that one of the last pillars that holds up the integrity of our nation. I'm talking about all the armed forces in general, but the Marine Corps in particular. Those pillars have now been so weakened that they're not going to hold up anything. And as I just said, I suspect the Chinese think this is the greatest thing that ever happened because they're not going to be, their army is not going to be woke. You go back and look at the history of the Korean War when the Marines and the Army got as far north as Chosin Reservoir and were within a striking distance of the Yalu River, the Chinese crossed the Yalu River in thousands of them, and some of them were only armed with sharp sticks. And they were so ferocious that the Army turned tail and ran. It wasn't even a retreat. It was a bug out. So that's who's on the other side of this. And we're going to politically correct them. Hey, fellas over there, Chinese Red Army, time out. We are much more politically correct than you are, so you better watch out, Charlie. Okay, next on the card, I've got the governor versus the legislature, but I got a couple of folks there in the green room, an appropriate color. First one is our Carl. The second one is Paul from Boston. So we'll start out with our Carl. Good morning, good afternoon, our Carl.
Hey, good afternoon, Bob. I once saw a short video on YouTube, just a few minutes long, but it compares the Army recruitment ads. The title is Army Recruitment Ads, China versus Russia versus USA, and it's really enlightening if anyone wants to be to have a chuckle or be scared, because it doesn't look good for America in the future. I've got a question for you, though, as far as how we got to this point.
Mm-hmm.
I think the left likes to get in, to infiltrate institutions, and then start selectively bringing in people who are like-minded and keeping those who are with an opposing viewpoint out. And that happened in our, on our campuses decades ago. The ratio of conservatives to liberal was much closer. I forgot what it was. It was like 5-4 or something. And now when you count all professors, including the lower level professors. It's like 50-1. So I remember vaguely reading an article some time ago in which during the Obama administration, a lot of high-level brass were forced into retirement, and I believe that what happened is that higher brass with similar viewpoints or leftist viewpoints were pushed up the ranks. Is this possible? I mean, did I imagine reading that story? Do you remember reading?
Sure, yeah, he did, because apparently they wouldn't go along with the woke agenda. And by the way, how did we get here? We've been talking a long time about the Frankfurt School, 1922, and the theory that the workers' revolt wasn't going to happen, so that it was necessary to hollow out the institutions of the West. And that's exactly what happened. It began in the 1960s when everybody thought, oh, this is so much fun, flower children and all that stuff, free love, on and on. Well, those folks, the ones that really drank the Kool-Aid are now running a lot of the show. And they are doing exactly what the Frankfurt School suggested should be done, hollow out the Western institutions until they are powerless, which is very close to where we are.
I don't know if it's a conscious strategy, but I think they do infiltrate into the institutions, and they began many decades ago to our learning institutions, the universities, the colleges, and it's amazing how it's worked out. It's almost like a conspiracy. I don't believe in conspiracy theories, but it's just strange how it has worked out, how they get in there and they start.
It's not a conspiracy because it's not a group of people getting together and agreeing to do something. But what it amounts to is a method of disseminating a particular kind of propaganda and doctrine that when people pick it up, they want to spread it around. So it's grown, and it's taken over the Democrat Party. I mean, even Joe Biden, who ran as I'm just Uncle Joe, a good, moderate, middle of the road guy who's going to bring people together. And when the squad got a hold of him, they turned him hard left. And the only two Democrats that are not over there on the left are Sinema and the guy from West Virginia. What's his name?
Joe Manchin.
Joe Manchin, yeah. So that's all we got there, Carl.
Yeah, I was just wondering, if that was even possible, to force brass. I don't know how you do that, force them into retirement or move on or just make things uncomfortable for them. So But that's pretty amazing how well it's gone. Gramsci was, the results of his ideology are just horrible, for the West and especially America. But you have to kind of admire the genius of his innovation. It's just it's amazing. I never thought it would have worked out like it is working out. It's just kind of shocking.
Well, when you destroy people's institutions and their faith in their institutions, they become much more malleable. And of course, that's the point. The first target had to be religion, especially the Catholic religion. And then the rewriting of history, the tearing down of the statues, the demonization of anything south of the Mason-Dixon line, telling everybody that cops are worse than robbers, and we've got to defund all of these things, the fact that the idea that a man could become pregnant, all of these things that you thought you knew are now being challenged. So because of all this uncertainty, you're going to be a lot more susceptible to stuff that you would have laughed at 10 years ago. That's where we are.
Yeah, and as far as how that applies to Guam, a few years ago, I can remember I was, I don't know if I was conversing with this person online. He's one of my Facebook friends. He's kind of a bit of a radical, and he's on the in the separatist mode. But he was commenting about how that they're going to create more activists, more social justice warriors in the local school system. And I was just kind of, chuckling, and thinking, that's not going to happen. How are they going to do that? And here we are. It's happening. It's happening locally. It's happening at the university. It's happening in our school system. So, this stuff, we're not immune from it. It's coming for our children too.
So the only suggestion I can give you right now, Carl, is tell all your friends they need to listen to Tall Tales, because they're not getting the kind of immunity, subjective immunity that they need to stand up against this stuff. They're not getting it from the Daily News, that's for darn sure. They're not getting it from
the corporate media. Has gone in for this. I mean, you just really need to be selective about what you listen to and watch these days, because it's just a lot of the same indoctrination. It's amazing.
True
anyway,
enough.
Bob, thanks for allowing me to chime in. I appreciate it.
You got it, Carl.
All right.
All right, so our Carl, and as I said, I was going to give our Carl a break today. His son is in the Air Force, but we won't talk about that. All right, so next we've got Paul from Boston. Good afternoon, Paul.
Bob, how are you?
I'm living the life, Paul.
Did you miss me?
Paul, you're got about 30 seconds to start your call.
Okay.
Don't waste my time.
I won't waste your time, sir. Just chiming in about vaccinations from the mainland.
All right.
I work in schools. People need to get vaccinated, and I know it's a choice and everything like that. And when you say to people that having that it's a bad thing and things like that, the numbers just don't stand up. Knowing people that have passed away from it, it's hard to really hear that. I mean, do you look at the numbers, or I don't know?
Okay.
No, I'm asking, would you not get vaccinated?
I have not been vaccinated because I will not, I'm not going to say I won't, but I'm trying to hold out for the Novavax vaccine, which was manufactured without the use of tissue from aborted babies. I have a religious problem with that.
Yeah, I mean, but I look at the science too. Of right now, people are just getting sick. And my mother is of age and she's very high risk, so I made sure that I was taking every precaution. If you look back, I mean, you also do quote early 1900s Massachusetts law. You do.
Massachusetts. Jacobson versus Massachusetts is not Massachusetts law. It's a Supreme Court decision, Paul from Boston.
Court ruling in 1905.
Yeah.
But also, when the polio vaccine came around, I think you were alive for that.
I was certainly alive. I lived through the whole polio scare, and I took the Salk vaccine when it came out, which was an inoculation. Later on, the Sabin vaccine came out, which was something you popped in your mouth.
You took it orally.
I took the Salk, which was an inoculation. Yep. Later on, the Sabin vaccine came along. That was something you popped in your mouth.
And I think that that vaccine proved pretty well to help out or to, save lives, pretty much, for polio.
Polio in the 1950s was so serious that in 1952. One of the towns in the same football conference that my hometown was in canceled all their games, forfeited all their games because
just like COVID had to cancel every single event.
Yep.
Ever.
Yeah.
There were no games played last year. Nothing happened. So that's pretty serious.
Yep.
I would think it's more serious than polio. But I've had people in my family die, and I would just like people to. You can do the research, you can do all of that, but when you spread things that say don't do it, it's kind of weird or not good to say to people. So.
Hear the music, Paul from Boston?
Oh yeah, I miss you, man.
That means I gotta say goodbye. I gotta take a break. So long.
I miss you.
Now on Guam, 511 Tactical, offering the largest selection of tactical apparel and gear for law enforcement, first responders, tactical operators, and recreational enthusiasts. We're located next to Bargain Tactical, Guam's largest firearms dealer. Find both stores, Route 16 Army Drive between the Dungeon and Little Wangs. Open Monday through Friday, 10 to 7, Saturdays 10 to 5, and closed on Sunday. Visit us online at tacticalgearguam.com. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Tactical Gear Guam. 511 Tactical, now on Guam. Always be ready.
Mezcla, read all about it. Check out Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Tuman for lunch. Serving up some savory seafood specials such as spicy garlic shrimp, candied salmon, or better yet, the local favorite, snapper or shrimp escabeche. Available only during lunch hours. Make sure to come down and try these tasty specials and more. Call 969-2652 for more info or to make a reservation. Located at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tuman, Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. A true taste of Guam.
Okay, so here we are, about 8 more minutes to that big halftime show. Next item on the card is governor versus legislature. And you're probably thinking, yeah, well, that's every day, isn't it? But this is a little different. I'm going to give you the facts here, and by the time I'm done, I'm sure that you will I'm waiting. Yeah, you will get a rise out of it. Yeah. Governor Lulian Guerrero said Tuesday that the 2 RISE bills passed by the legislature last week are conflicting, and she plans to veto them. The governor said she was actually surprised that the 2 pieces of legislation passed in the legislation, given that there are conflicting provisions in both. One says use the money until December 2023. Another one says use the money until June 2022. One says do 800. One says 1,000 for single, 1,600 for joint, and 2,000 for joint. So it's 2 conflicting bills, Leon Guerrero said in an interview with News Talk K57's Patty Arroyo. The governor said that if the legislature was really passionate and compassionate about giving money to our people, they should have gotten together and come up with one bill. So I'm a bit perplexed, because if I sign both bills, which one do we follow? But I just also want to say that both of them have provisions that use ARP money, American Rescue Plan money, which is totally against their authority. And that's why I label this as governor versus legislature. How many times have I talked about Wong versus Kamina, the U.S. District Court case here on Guam that holds that money coming from the feds cannot be appropriated by the Guam legislature. Excuse me. And so there's very major concerns about both pieces of legislation, but the more disappointment that I have is they did not get together to come up with one legislation. I guess what the governor's thinking is that she's announced before that the money that comes from the feds is hers. She'll spend it however she wants. She's not going to do the RISE Act. She invented her own plan called the All Rise program, since she's the one that controls the purse strings. So if there were only one bill instead of two, I guess the reason she prefers that is less ink. She wouldn't want to waste ink writing veto twice. When if it were a
She's already appropriated that money, Bob.
Exactly. So this is an important consideration. Why send her two bills that she can veto when you could do it quite nicely with one bill? She added that when she was a senator and two senators had great ideas, the Speaker and the Rules Committee chairperson, primarily the Speaker, will not entertain the bill until the senators meet and get together and hammer out just one bill. So I don't know what the leadership, it's a bit kind of concerning for me, the leadership. Now, who would that be? The Speaker? Oh, that might be Therese Terlahi, who's not been one of the loyal soldiers for the Democrats. But the other one is the Vice Speaker, the chairperson of Rules, Tina Rose Munya-Barnes, who's been pretty close to the governor. So she's dumping on one of her folks. The governor also said that contrary to what critics are saying, oh, here we go now. Here comes a really important part of this story. The governor also said that contrary to what critics are saying, her administration has been, I need some music here, Jose. Her administration has been compassionate, sympathetic, and empathetic to the people. We worked as hard as we could within our control. And sometimes we don't have the control because of federal guidelines and requirements and waiting to make sure things are done right the first time, appropriately and accurately. We've done a major, amazing job in putting these monies into the hands of the people. Yeah. So I guess she's as proud of her humility as I am of mine when she says we've done an amazing job by our own admission. She added that some of the states in the mainland still have some CARES money they haven't used. And so, you know, to say that we didn't want to help the people is far from the truth and far from what the evidence shows. We have put out $1.5 billion in federal monies and grants, all within our authority, all done very appropriately and within legal means. So going back to the two bills, actually one bill would be one too many. Again, we've been through this so many times here on Tall Tales. The legislature passed a bill called the All Rise Act. It had criteria. Income of less than 40 grand, $800 per person, double for twin filers, $30 million worth of the CARES or the federal funds was supposed to be used. And if that wasn't available, there'd be a local appropriation. Well, there's no local appropriation. And when it comes to the federal funds, the governor decides where to spend it. And she said, I'm only going to spend $30 million. That's it. When that's gone, it's over, even if some people didn't get it. Okay, I'm going to come back to Jim Moylan's treadmill right after the big halftime show.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Infrastructure package headed for passage. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says they have an agreement to pass the $1.2 trillion infrastructure plan later today. It's expected 18 Republican senators will join all of the Democrats in voting for it. And then the Majority Leader says it's on to what he calls the human infrastructure bill.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says Democrats are already working on a companion $3.5 trillion bill funding social and climate initiatives, as well as paving the way for green cards for millions of immigrant workers.
We plan to pay for this package by making the wealthy pay their fair share.
Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell calls the plan a socialist shopping list and says Democrats are on their own when it comes to raising the debt ceiling.
If they don't want Republicans' input, they don't need our help.
Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has urged Congress to raise the amount the government can borrow so the U.S. doesn't default on its obligations.
Fox's Rachel Sutherland. More vaccine mandates are coming. Washington state to require all state employees and people who work in healthcare to get the coronavirus vaccine. Governor Jay Inslee claiming,
"We want freedom for everyone to live without even to think about the COVID virus. And we know that there is only one path to that freedom, and that is through more Washingtonians getting this safe, effective, successful vaccine."
Governor says those employees who don't get the shot will have the freedom to continue their employment elsewhere. The Pentagon says it will order American service people to get inoculated at the direction of the president. White House Health Advisor Dr. Anthony Fauci predicts there will be another wave of vaccine mandates, including in private businesses, once the FDA grants final approval to the vaccines, which now have only emergency use authorization. America is listening to Fox News.
Diving and seeing our coral reef full of life.
I really love hiking the trails.
I really love going to the beach. The sunsets are amazing.
Your island needs you. Help preserve what makes our island home. Stop those who threaten our wildlife, plants, and environment. Install the free Toka app and report poaching, littering, burning, and other environmental crimes. Call 864-TOKA or install the free Toka app today. This public service announcement is brought to you by the Department of Agriculture, UOGC Grant, and Choice Broadcasting.
State lawmakers in New York have laid out a timetable for impeachment proceedings against Governor Andrew Cuomo, including the drafting of articles of impeachment next month. Two other developments on Monday.
First, Governor Cuomo's top aide resigned, and one of his accusers is speaking out for the first time.
What he did to me was a crime. He broke the law.
That's Brittany Commisso, who was previously only known as Executive Assistant Number 1 in the recently released Attorney General's investigation into sexual harassment allegations. Commisso sat down for her first television interview, alleging that Governor Andrew Cuomo groped and kissed her without her consent. Commisso filed a criminal complaint with the Albany Sheriff's Department, which is investigating possible misdemeanor charges. The governor denies the allegations.
Fox's Laura Ingle, one of Jeffrey Epstein's longtime accusers, has sued Britain's Prince Andrew of sexually assaulting her when she was 17. Prince Andrew has previously said it never happened. It's neither rain nor snow, but budget deficits that will soon lead to a purposeful lag in U.S. mail delivery.
Effective October 1st, the financially troubled U.S. Postal Service will begin slowing down some first-class mail deliveries from 3-day service standards to 5-day service standards, while raising the price of a first-class postage stamp to 58 cents. The move receiving pushback from the Postal Service's Inspector General, members of Congress, and attorneys general in 20 states. Postmaster General Louis DeJoy last week said that USPS posted a $3 billion quarterly net loss and that it can't continue with the status quo. Jeff Monasso, Fox News.
Now, the single largest wildfire in California's history. Crews are warning the Dixie wildfire in the Sierra Nevada could get worse in the days ahead because of gusty winds and hot, dry weather. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
A homeowner's policy protects much more than just your house. It also protects you against claims from someone being hurt on your property. If a visitor is injured at your place, how much are you covered for? The smart thing to do is get the answer today.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Hey! Big news! Now you can listen to The Point on radio.com. And radio.com gives you so much more. Local news stations give you what's going on in your community. Get national news from CBS, CNN, or Fox News Radio. Take a break with one of the hundreds of music, sports, and talk stations. Love podcasts? Radio.com has thousands of true crime, comedy, kids and family podcasts, and more. Listen anytime, anywhere. On your PC, smart speakers, and a variety of connected devices. Or download the radio.com app now from the App Store or Google Play.
So another great halftime show here on Tall Tales. We are now in the second half of Tall Tales. And I'm going to go back to governor versus the legislature. And the governor objected to the legislature passing two bills that deal with the same subject that are in conflict with one another. Why pass two bills for her to veto when you could do it all in one bill? And no matter what you put in the bill, she's going to veto it because she's made it very clear that the money that you're trying to spend with your bills is under her sole discretion because of a court case called Wong versus Kamina that holds that money coming from the feds to the governor can't be appropriated by the legislature. So Jim Moylan keeps introducing bills and amendments and writing letters. Come on, let's do this, Lou. Now they've passed two bills, et cetera. And even if she didn't veto them, it wouldn't make any difference because she controls the purse strings. So because Moylan keeps chasing this dog that he'll never catch, I've kind of hypothesized this treadmill on the floor of the legislature. Imagine a treadmill that's so large that I was about to say a man, but I've caught myself in time, that a person could go inside this treadmill and you know what it would be like? He would walk and the treadmill would spin and there would be signs on the treadmill so that as the treadmill spun, a new sign would come into view as you made it rotate. And the sign would say, "Rise Act ahead."
Almost there.
Yeah, so you get into that treadmill and walk and walk and walk and walk. Jim would do that. And other senators say, "Jim, what are you doing?" "Oh, I'm going after the Rise Act. I'm almost there because the sign says Rise Act ahead. So I'm going to keep walking on this thing here." Jim, the guy on the radio said that no matter what bills you introduce, the governor is the one that controls the money.
What I find interesting too, Bob, and I know this is a political strategy because the campaign year is coming up. Did both bills pass unanimously? I know one did unanimously.
I don't know.
But the other bill, I'm not sure. But I think everyone knows what the real deal is. And I think we're being played as if we're fools.
Yeah. So this is a classic case of pandering, Jim. I introduced the second RISE Act. I worked like a demon to try to get the governor to fund that RISE Act bill, but I just couldn't get it started. Yeah, so I don't know if Jim doesn't understand, so he's going through these motions because he thinks, well, hers is just an executive order and mine would be a law if we could override the veto. Or if he does understand, knowing that he's just on this legislative treadmill, and then I don't know which is the worst. But we'll get to that in the next item on the card, which is Byrne versus Moylan. And let's see, I got somebody here waiting in the green room. Oh, yeah, it's Repeat who wants to talk about Senator Moylan. Go ahead, Repeat.
Hey, maybe they could take some of the ARPA funds and buy a huge hamster wheel. Well, I think put it there at his office.
He's got one on the floor of the legislature down there with the signs. Keep going for the RISE Act, right?
Yeah, well, it's like a super resolution.
That's about what it amounts
to. In effect,
to.
what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when you look at everything, the big picture, all the PUA, all the PPP, all the PEBT now, the school books or school supplies that are being bought, the school uniforms that are being bought, the 3 stimuluses and the local stimulus, where does the RISE Act, fall in comparison to all that?
Well,
it's a drop in the bucket, and he's making it seem like it's a tsunami.
I was going to say small potatoes, but I probably should rephrase that as just small scoops of rice.
Yes. And so if you really think about it and you look at it from the big picture perspective like that, he's wasting all this energy and making all this hoopla over what? The legislature has more work to do, more important work to do.
Yeah, and
he's tying it up,
And he's Don Quixote. He thinks that windmill is a dragon, and he keeps trying to slay it, even though everybody says, "Hey, Don, that ain't a dragon; it's a windmill." Well, I'm going to kill it anyhow. It's kind of what he's doing.
Well, the other thing I wanted to mention, Uncle Bob, before I get off, is that today is a very important day. There's someone whose birthday today is ought to be celebrated with fireworks and drones.
Okay, tell me more.
Isn't it Mr. Jose's birthday?
It's Jose's birthday, yeah.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Antonio Banderas.
It is.
Well, Antonio Banderas can aspire.
He does look up to me.
Up to Jose.
Well, thank you very much, Pete. I really appreciate that.
It is Jose's birthday, and I probably should have asked him a couple days ago to find a proper rendition of the song Happy Birthday to use as bumper music today, but my bad.
Well, don't forget, it's got to be PC. It's got to be all-inclusive. It's got to check all the blocks.
That's true.
You don't want to get canceled, Uncle Bob.
That's very true. I have a feeling that I'm on the verge of cancellation every time I step in front of this microphone. But what the heck, right?
I'm here to protect you, Bob.
There you go.
All right. Have a great day. I'll be listening.
Good that you called, Repeat. Next item on the card is Byrne versus Moylan. Yeah, Byrne versus Moylan. So the question, I guess, would be, hey, Jim, are you feeling the burn? I think he'll be feeling the burn if he watches the news tonight. So this is a press release from Crystal Paco San Augustine, formerly known as Crystal Paco. And she says, half a day, media partners. Please see below the statement in response to the FOIA request sent from Senator Moylan directed to DOA Director Edward Byrne. That statement should be attributed to me. And here it goes, quote, there is a fundamental misunderstanding on the part of the senator regarding what a FOIA request is and what the government's obligations are in responding to such requests. These are document requests, not interrogatories. Now, let me stop and explain. In a civil case, there's something called discovery, where one party basically gets to ask the other side questions. I think people are kind of familiar with the deposition on oral examination, where the lawyers and the parties sit down in front of a court reporter and the lawyers ask questions. But also very common are discovery devices called written interrogatories. So one party can send a list of questions to another party, which the other party has to answer. Now, if the questions are completely inappropriate, the receiving party can go to court and ask for what's called a protective order and be excused from answering. Or the serving party can go to court and ask for an order to produce, requiring the party to answer the interrogatories. But the interrogatories are written questions. Things like, where were you on the night of the 4th of July, 1954? Or how long did you own your 1992 Rocky? The questions. So you can ask questions and the other side has to answer the questions. That's what interrogatories are. Now, with a FOIA request, you don't ask questions. The only thing you can do with a FOIA request is you can demand. You don't even need a request. You can demand public documents. And a public document is any document in any particular form, even electronic, that is involved in the way the government operates. And the receiving party, if he is the custodian of that document, has to give it to you, whether he likes it or not, whether it's embarrassing or accusative or whatever. So that's the difference between the two. And Byrne says to Jim Moylan, these are document requests, not interrogatories. This is such a basic, well-litigated area of the law that it is shocking that a sitting senator is not intimately familiar with its limitations. It is shocking. To the extent the senator is earnest in seeking production of documents, he is welcome to submit a proper FOIA request, and DOA will properly respond. Please provide all public records that show whatever. To the extent the senator believes that the FOIA somehow gives him free license to pose philosophical questions about the propriety of executive branch spending, there's a process by which he can attempt to test this theory in court. Well, not really. You can't go to court with that sort of theory either. In order to get into court, you have to describe a case or controversy where the person that you're suing owes you something, and that the court could enter a judgment against that person, ordering that person to give you what you're owed. You can't ask the court interesting questions, except for this silly situation that we have where the Supreme Court issues what are called advisory opinions, something no other place in the country has. Anyhow, that's really not important to what Byrne is saying. Senator Moylan's actions need to be acknowledged for what they more than likely are: a thinly veiled attempt to abuse the FOIA process to shout political views into the public sphere and bully hardworking government agencies into responding in the name of transparency. These questions are beneath the dignity of this administration to respond to, and frankly, they should be beneath the dignity of this senator to ask. In a climate of fake news, the senator creates fake work. Yeah. So, Ed Byrne Breaks Bad is the title of this little battle, right? Now, I have an article that ran in PNC. Senator James Moylan has sent this is the article the precursor here, has sent a Freedom of Information Act request to the Department of Administration asking for information on the American Rescue Plan deposits made by the federal government. And I'll cut right to the questions. Moylan says, Bank of Guam is where the government of Guam places its funds. I did a comparison analysis of recent years, and once again, there seems to be some consistency across the board when comparing the numbers with other financial institutions on island. Basically, my question revolves around the $600 million question. Where is the money, the senator asked. Considering this concern and pursuant to Guam law, Moylan requested answers to the following questions. 1, where the federal funds from the Guam American Rescue Plan deposited into the Bank of Guam or the Bank of Guam Trust. That is not a FOIA request, a FOIA demand. If they were deposited into Bank of Guam, how much was deposited in ARP funds? That is not a FOIA demand. When was the initial ARP amount deposited? Same thing. How much has been spent to date from those funds? What were they spent on? Please provide specifics. You know, it's bad enough when directors don't understand the Freedom of Information Act request. But if funds were deposited into the Bank of Guam Trust, A, would the Bank of Guam Trust qualify as an eligible bank pursuant to Guam law? B, how much is being paid to the Bank of Guam Trust to manage the funds? C, did the trust invest in collateralization as an eligible bank would be required to do? 4, considering the collateralization required and risks associated for such a large deposit, was a request for proposal issued by the government to consider spreading the deposits throughout several eligible banks in Guam? Winding up, once again, these questions have been prompted after reviewing reports from the GBA. It's possible that the deposits were indeed made into the Bank of Guam, and other reasons exist for the lack of substantial bump in deposits within their quarterly report. So Byrne is exactly right. He is right on point.
These are easy questions to convert into FOIA requests.
Yeah, what he needs to do. I'll give you a little help, Jim. Number 1, please provide public records showing which funds from the American Rescue Plan were deposited in the Bank of Guam.
There you go.
Number 2, please provide public records showing showing what federal funds, etc., on and on. If you're not asking for federal public records, you're not asking, you're not demanding within the confines of the Sunshine Law, which is really what the law is called, but everybody calls it FOIA anyhow. So, you know, you got to kind of know what you're doing when you're doing this stuff, Jim, or you're not going to get anywhere.
And we talked about this before, and I forgive me for forgetting the answer. If a phone call is recorded, is that a public record under FOIA? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you can't ask somebody to give you a summary of a phone call.
You cannot.
So documentation is the key
Absolutely.
to a FOIA request.
Yeah. And, you know, there's some imprecision because if you don't properly describe the document, then the management official doesn't have a duty to turn it over to you. So there's some art involved in drafting up a proper sunshine law demand.
Be as specific as you can get.
Well, maybe be as general as you can get.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I meant the type of document, but now I see what you mean.
Yeah, it depends on what it is that you're looking for. Yeah. But Jim, it wouldn't hurt to read the law before you go jumping into this. So now the interesting thing is that Crystal Paco San Augustine, formerly known as Crystal Paco, has issued a press release. And she doesn't know either. So here's Crystal, and this just came out this afternoon. PNC, develops a story and puts it online even before it runs on TV. Here's what the story said. The governor's office has responded to the FOIA request sent by James Moylan, saying it's a thinly veiled attempt by the senator to politicize the issue in his favor. What issue is he attempting to politicize, Crystal Paco? Earlier, Moylan sent a FOIA request to AdLoop asking for additional information on the administration's spending plans for American Rescue Plan funds, as well as ARP funds made by the federal government. Now, notice she leaves mention of the Bank of Guam completely out here. I wonder why. But Crystal Paco San Augustine, the governor's director of communications, said there's a fundamental misunderstanding on the part of Moylan regarding what a FOIA request is and what the government's obligations are in responding to such requests. Now, this is the governor's director of communications. And if you want to send a FOIA request and you don't want to burden the governor, you send it to her. And this is what she said concerning what Moylan sent. These are document requests, not interrogatories. This is such a basic, well-litigated area, etc. So she said, referring to what Moylan sent, these are document requests, not interrogatories. If that's the case, why don't you respond? In other words, she doesn't know the difference either between a document request and he sent document. What he sent were document requests, not interrogatories. And Burns said exactly the opposite. The rest of it, she pretty much picked up what Burns said, so it's fair, it's reasonably correct. But one, she got that wrong. And two, there's no mention of the Bank of Guam at all. And that, to me, if Moylan is doing what Byrne accused him of, using this as a device, to make political hay, then that's the key. Why is the Bank of Guam hanging on to this money for so long? Crystal Paco San Augustine. Now,
but nothing to see here, Bob.
Exactly.
We were told that during the 2020 elections, was it?
Yeah.
Nothing to see.
Right. Moylan is a puzzle. When he was first elected, I had high hopes for him. He did not come from the GovGuam incubator. He was, he'd been in the private sector all his life. He was a soldier. He'd been in the National Guard. He comes from a fine family here on the island. His uncle was lieutenant governor, ran for governor. His uncle was the youngest person ever elected to the Guam legislature, Kurt Moylan, 25 years old. Yeah. So I had high hopes for him, and I think he probably is well-intended. He probably wants to do the right thing. And I think he's probably honest, but some of the stuff that he's done. The hate crimes bill, you know, and it wasn't just it was even worse than the standard hate crimes bill. It would punish anyone who wreaked violence on nerds. Yeah, it was protecting nerds. Yeah, that's about the only thing he didn't include. But, you know, if you're a Republican senator, why are you going to go over there and introduce this left-wing identity politics legislation that only Democrats could love? And then when the Bob and Ray resolution came along, not only did he do nothing with it, he didn't even talk about it. He didn't even mention it.
Identity crisis.
Yeah. So he could have made use of the Bob and Ray resolution before it became moot. But, of course, he didn't. He signed on as a co-sponsor of Tina's crazy Resolution 56, her insular cases, our racist resolution. Signed on to that. At least he pulled out of it. And then he doesn't know how the Sunshine Law works. It's quite clear. He could have written a letter to Byrne, who's not the director of administration. He is the director of administration. And he could have written a letter to Byrne, and he could have said, "Dear Mr. Byrne, I'm curious about a few things. I have some questions I hope you can answer. List his questions. Thank you very much, Jim Moylan." If Byrne answers, great. If Byrne doesn't answer, well, you asked. Or he could send a Sunshine Law demand. Pursuant to the Sunshine Law, I hereby demand production of the following public records, and you describe them. But it's like sending a birthday card to somebody and saying, "I hope you liked my FOIA."
I didn't have to beep that out.
Yeah, no. So nice play, Jim. Okay, let's head for Wrigley Field and the seventh inning stretch.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Hafare, this is Congressman St. Nicholas. Your congressional office would like to remind you that pandemic unemployment assistance is set to expire on September 6th of this year. We encourage the people of Guam to seek out active employment as much as possible, as jobs continue to remain limited, and we want to prevent hardship for our people at the conclusion of the PUA program. Thank you, and situas mahase.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
Okay, next on the card, I've got Biden versus the Constitution. And this is something that I got out of Town Hall by one of their writers named Katie Pavlich. The title is Biden's Tyrannical Attack on Private Property Rights. This week, President Biden solidified his position as a left-wing radical, not the Democrat moderate he claimed to be during his 2020 campaign. He did so by launching an outrageous attack not just against private property rights, but against the U.S. Constitution. For over a year, the federal government has forced private property owners to allow tenants renting their homes to stay, despite months of failing to pay rent. The Trump administration implemented the policy in the early days of the pandemic as governments shut down private businesses and Americans lost their jobs. Renters were given the benefit of a moratorium while property owners were still obligated to pay their mortgages to the bank. I thought this was unconstitutional from the get-go. It's in effect denying someone access to his property without due process of law. The federal government attempted to blunt the issue with relief packages, but in typical fashion, bureaucratic red tape has prevented property owners from receiving help. A North Carolina landlord says he's out $24,000 in unpaid rents from tenants, while one renter bought 3 boats over the course of the eviction moratorium. Might as well. Buddy Shoup, who owns 35 properties across the state, said he's been forced to maintain the properties and hemorrhage costs while the federal government slowly dribbles out rental assistance, of which only 7% has been doled out to renters in need. Now, I got to stop here and tell you, the left is always kicking around the word fascism. Those Republicans, those conservatives, they're fascists. Well, what you're looking at here with this, the federal government jumping in and deciding who has to pay rent and who doesn't, is a classic case of fascism. Instead of taking control of the property as a socialist would, you use your power, the coercive power of the state, to control the property the same way you would if you owned it. So in this particular case, the state is deciding we're going to tell people they don't have to pay rent. This is tyranny. In June, the Supreme Court ruled the moratorium issued through the Centers for Disease Control was unconstitutional. That's another really interesting thing here. If it were going to happen, if we're going to institute this, you have to find, and under our system of federalism, which is just about gone, you're supposed to find a constitutional hook to hang your hat on when you do these things. In other words, if you can't find the assignment of the power you're going to use in the U.S. Constitution, you can't do it. And kind of the do-all section has been the Commerce Clause of the Constitution. The Congress has the right to regulate commerce between the states. So I could have seen some kind of regulation saying that people too many mortgage foreclosures has an adverse effect on commerce. Therefore, we're going to suspend foreclosure actions. I wouldn't have liked it. It might have had a chance of passing constitutional muster, but that's not what the feds did. Biden had the Centers for Disease Control issue this rule, this non-foreclosure rule. And the Centers for Disease Control said, this passes constitutional muster because we have the responsibility of controlling disease. And when there are foreclosures, people are moving from one house to another, spreading the virus around too much. How silly can you get? It's almost like they hired Jim Moylan to be a consultant here. Yeah. So they didn't even use the best argument that they had. They probably used the worst argument, but of course it would have been more popular. Oh yeah, the CDC, they're trying to fight the Wuhan virus, so I understand. Now, here's a quote from Justice Brett Kavanaugh. In my view, clear and specific congressional authorization would be necessary for the CDC to extend the moratorium past July 31. Justice Brett Kavanaugh wrote about the 5-4 ruling. Congressional Democrats, and certainly if you're going to do it, you got to have more than just a rule from an administrative agency. So a statute invoking Commerce Clause powers might have done it, might not have. Congressional Democrats, led by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, did nothing to fix the issue with legislation. They didn't make it a priority. This week, President Biden acknowledged the court's decision, admitted an extension was likely unconstitutional, and moved forward to screw private property owners anyhow. Quote, I can't guarantee you the court won't rule that what we've done, or that we don't have that authority, but at least we'll have the ability to, if we have to appeal to keep this going for a month at least, I hope longer. So Biden's saying, I'm going to do it by executive order. I know it's unconstitutional, but, let them sue, and it'll take at least a month for it to be resolved, maybe longer. The court already ruled he doesn't have the authority. His statement in his admission, he's openly violating his oath to be faithful to the Constitution, respect equal branches of the government, and uphold the law. If he weren't a Democrat with a majority in Congress, it would be an impeachable offense. Well, maybe they'll impeach Trump for doing this. I know, Jose, you're saying, but he's not in office anymore. And my response is, since when did that matter? Who does this hurt the most? Mom and pop rental owners who rely on their property for income. They've been underwater for months, and many are on the verge of bankruptcy. And it hurts not only mom and pop rental owners, and that there are a lot of people like that. People buy a house in X neighborhood, they move to Y neighborhood, they keep the house in X neighborhood, they figure we'll keep it and we'll rent it out, right? Or they get a little bit ahead, they go into debt, they mortgage, they buy another house, and they've got a rental income, and they figure, by the time we're ready for retirement, this is going to be part of our rental income, and we'll have paid off the mortgage. But it hurts more than that, because it hurts the people who are looking for reasonably priced rental property. Because if you have cash, if you've got capital and you're looking to invest, are you going to invest in rental property knowing that the president is going to has the ability and willingness to come along and say, good luck with your rental property. I hope it works out for you, because I'm going to tell people they don't have to pay rent. That takes, that lowers the desirability of that form of investment greatly. And what it means is that people are going to have to charge higher rent. Landlords are going to have to charge more rent to cover for the time that they can't charge any rent because of a knucklehead like the president here. So it hurts the entire housing market when he did that. The court already ruled he doesn't have the authority. His statement is his admission. Ironically, Biden's unconstitutional attack on private property rights will only squeeze the lower and middle class he claims to represent. Homeowners on the verge of bankruptcy present a perfect opportunity for big investment funds to swoop in and buy up rental properties. This, of course, will only monopolize the housing market to big corporations in Wall Street. Who else can afford it? Ensuring the middle class is eventually frozen out of the housing market forever. More broadly speaking, if the CDC can regulate private property owners and their ability to collect rent and enforce contracts, what else can they do with unlimited and unending emergency power? It's no wonder the left is constantly calling for additional Second Amendment regulations under the guise of, quote, public health. The same can be said for the left's calls to address climate change. Biden's attack on the rule of law and private property rights cannot go without consequence. It's a test run on the limits of executive branch power that will unravel foundation American principles if allowed to go unchallenged.
Probably was intended to as well.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll do this, and we'll see what the the Republicans in Congress do, and if they let it go, we'll try something more. What should happen? Every single Democrat in Congress should sign an impeachment resolution. Every single Republican in the House should sign an impeachment resolution. That's what should happen. Will it happen? I doubt it. Because they don't spend enough time listening to tall tales. Okay, well, it looks like I've speared a new caller here, Jose. Lance wants to talk about critical race theory. Tell me about critical race theory, Lance.
Yeah, Hafide. Buenas, Mr. Klitzkie.
Uh-huh.
Just to touch briefly on what you just were talking about, that's just another one in the long list of boneheaded, self, he's just doing it for his cronies. Everything he's doing is just backward ass. So, is critical race theory gonna be pushed on the Guam public school system? And if so, do us as parents have any say in it?
Well, I don't know if the people on the school board are. Let me back up a second. I don't know if leaders in the school system are imbued with critical race theory. We haven't heard as much about it here as on the mainland. And the second part of your question, we have school board meetings. There's always a public participation part of the school board meeting, so you can go to the school board and tell them what you think.
This is just weakening, the foundation, the fabric that this country was made upon. You tie your boots up in the morning and you go get what's yours, and whoever works the hardest and puts the most effort is gonna, yield the best results. But this poor me victimization that we're indoctrinating into this generation is poison.
It is indeed. It is indeed.
It's not like America has not taken steps towards, trying to, alleviate, yes, there was slavery. Yes, there was. But you can't tell me that every year, every 5 years, every 10 years, whatever, that we haven't taken steps forward to alleviate those Neanderthalic ways that we thought before. And they cry about how racist America is. It's really weakening and just turning this generation into a mush of tears, and feel sorry for me. And it's really, really disheartening.
Yes, it is, Lance. So I'm glad to find that I've reached somebody out there in our international radio listening audience. So thanks for calling up and agreeing with me. Nice talking to you this afternoon.
I didn't mean to agree with you, but, facts are facts, and, common sense is common sense, and, that's what we need more of.
I agree. Thanks for calling. Okay, we got to head for Churchill Downs now. Thanks for calling, Lance.
Starting August 1st, pandemic unemployment assistance claimants must start searching for work to remain eligible for PUA benefits. 3 work searches a week are required. Work searches include registering on HireGuam.com, meeting with employers, submitting resumes and applications, and attending job fairs. Only a few are exempt from the work search requirement. This includes those working reduced hours, those in training programs, and self-employed individuals. Remember, PUA ends September the 4th. Now is the time. Let's rebuild our workforce. For more information, go to dol.guam.gov. Need to finish the job or start one the right way? Get the right stuff at East West Rental Center. You can switch to easy mode using industrial strength equipment. With years of experience helping builders, East West Rental gives you exactly what you need. Tools for landscaping, concrete, lifts, trucks, tables, tents, chairs, water blasters, excavators, forklifts, air compressors, and more. Call East West Rental Center at 646-1463 or visit them in Upper Tumont. Open Monday to Saturday from 7 to 5, Sundays 8 to 5.
So a couple of our tailgaters have provided some valuable information. First of all, it wasn't Ray Mabus. It wasn't Ray Mabus that came out here and lectured the crew about the firing of Captain Crozier. The guy's name was actually Thomas Maudley. Not Mabus, but Maudley. So close, but it still doesn't count, right? And then another one of our tailgaters tells me that, let's see, landlords were not eligible for PPP, one of those programs. The landlords really kind of took it in the shorts here. I'm really surprised. I'm surprised. Now, you said it needs a SCOTUS ruling. I think any district court would rule, and of course that's where you start, that this whole thing was unconstitutional. I'm surprised that no landlord or landlord's organization litigated the matter, because to me, it would have been a slam dunk.
Did they do something where they said it's going to expire, so they're not going to make a ruling on it?
Well, that's what happened when it got to the Supreme Court, and that's what Kavanaugh said. He said, yeah, it's clearly unconstitutional, but it's going to be over on July 31, so that'll give, I'm not going to say I'm not going to join the majority. That'll give Congress a chance to act. But why should they?
No reason.
Yeah.
Well, they did. The opposite.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, there's an old saying that a judge, when a matter comes before a judge cannot not rule on the question. Because by doing nothing, he's ruled for one party or the other, right? The non-moving party. Okay, let's see. I've got right here in Churchill Downs, I've got a doctor. We're not talking about malpractice today, but, well, anyhow. Good afternoon, Doc.
Hey, happy day, Senator. Happy day, Guam. You know, Senator, a lot of times, pretty much anything I say, some people will view as malpractice because they don't agree with me. So,
yeah,
that's part of life. I know. Hey, on the evictions and stuff like that, I think it's basic takings clause. They're taking their property without compensation, and you know, I think that there's an angle there they might be able to play on because they have to be compensated somewhere. If by government action they're denied, you know, the value of their property and rent from their property, I think that's classic takings clause.
Well,
I don't know.
You know, takings clause, we have learned from Pinehoff's case here, in order for the takings clause to apply, you have to completely obliterate any economic use of the property. It can't be partial, etc. So I would zero in on the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution, which applies to the feds, which says, nor shall private property, as you were, that's not the section I'm looking for. No person shall be twice put in jeopardy of his life or limb, nor compelled in a criminal case to be witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without
Right.
due process of law. Now,
Okay.
I don't know how you would get around characterizing the rental that you receive from your rental property as property, that you have a property right to the income from your house. So that to me invokes the due process clause of the Fifth Amendment. And again,
Right.
I'm really surprised that there wasn't at least any litigation that we heard about on it.
Well, at least not yet. I think that they re-rung the bell. And you know what kills me is it's obvious this is just a dilatory tactic. They know what they're doing is wrong. They know that, and they're like, oh, wink, wink, experts told us we might be able to get away with it. Well, you can give anybody $1 and a cup of coffee for an expert opinion and get an expert opinion. And that's just the sad part about it. And there are, the thing is, most of these people who own these rental properties, as you said, they're not very, very wealthy people. They're just people who have generally a moderate income, and they happen to have the property as a supplemental. And it's incredible. It's so sad.
Well,
but anyway,
and then I also mentioned the effect on the rental market, that if I've got 5 rental units out there, I got to get my sharp pencil out and I got to figure how much I need to raise the rent to cover the next time this happens.
Oh, but it's even more than that, in my opinion, Senator.
Mm-hmm.
People will not want to rent their properties to anybody, given that they're going to have to give it to them for free. So it's going to cause maybe an artificial housing shortage in some places, because they don't want to put people in until this thing's over, when they don't have to, take people with no rent anymore. And because in effect, this is a form of legal squatting, in my opinion. I don't know any other way of putting it than that. It's government sanctioned squatting is what it sounds like. And I don't know. It's so irritating to me, particularly when there is no needs test. That is, it's not as if they said, oh, if you're really down on your luck and you don't have the money, and we have a subsidy coming in later, we'll get the paperwork to you later. It's nothing like that. It's just one of these carte blanche, you are forgiven, or you are included in on this special deal. And it's just very, very sad. Hey, I was going to mention a little something. You had a caller calling about critical race theory. And I think that in general, I encourage the public and with an open mind, get on the internet, get some good readings, and really look at just the shallowness of the thinking that goes into a lot of this stuff. It's almost like I'm talking circular because I'm talking circular, and if you question me for talking circular, you're wrong, or they'll call you names. That's their approach to everything, which is very, very sad, because I would like young people to learn writing, reading, critical thinking, mathematics, sciences. I think that there are important topics every young person should be exposed to and master, aside from simple social concerns. And I view this as a social concern. It doesn't mean the topic is not important. It just means that the way that I think people are trying to pursue it or explain it is problematic.
Well, Ron, it's more than just a topic. The way it's presented, it's not a topic to be studied. It's a drill to be practiced.
Well, it's an ideology. I certainly agree with it. It is an ideology, apparently.
If you understand critical race theory, then you must do it. You must. It's
a practice imperative.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I have to say, we're supposed to have a separation between church and state in this country. And some of these things come awfully close to being quasi-religious. It's downright scary.
It is indeed.
Anyway,
we've got to head out of Churchill Downs, Ron, but thanks for calling. Good talking to you again.
Oh, always, sir. Have a great day.
We'll see you tomorrow. Happy birthday again to Jose.
Is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
A final infrastructure vote just hours away. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. The Senate adjourned a late-night session with a call to return at midday today and a vote for final approval for the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill.
One can always unearth controversial nuggets in any bill of this size. $125 million to potentially tax people based on how far they drive, and language requiring car makers to install breathalyzers. The bill heaps $256 billion on the debt, but supporters say it pays for itself by improving the movement of commerce. Expect 50 Democrats and 18 Republicans to vote yes.
Fox's Chad Pergram at the Capitol.
Just the start.
Fox's Chad Pergram at the Capitol reports the Democrats will follow with their own $3.5 trillion spending plan, which they call human infrastructure. It's to be considered under budget reconciliation rules. Another state is mandating its employees be inoculated against the coronavirus. Washington State's Governor Jay Inslee.
We will be requiring our state workers and our contractors who come onto our sites and workers in private health care and long-term care settings to be vaccinated as a condition of further employment.
The deadline for getting the shots, October the 4th. The state of Texas recruiting out-of-state health care workers to help fight a surge of coronavirus cases in the state. Most members